Good evening. Welcome to Drift and Dream Sleep. Tonight, there is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to finish, nothing you need to solve. You can simply rest. Take a slow breath in and let it go. Tonight, we are taking the last train to the sea. A quiet train. A long journey through the night. And a return to a small coastal town where an old blue door has been waiting for many years. So settle in. Let your shoulders soften, and let the sound of the train carry you gently into the story. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. It was a quiet night in New York City. The streets had begun to slow down. Most of the office lights were off. Only a few windows still glowed high above the city. A taxi passed through an empty intersection. Somewhere in the distance, a cafe was closing for the night. And at Grand Central Station, a woman named Ellie stood at the end of platform 1. She held a small brown suitcase in one hand. Over her shoulder was a faded blue travel bag. Inside the bag was a warm wool sweater, a notebook, an old blue covered book, and a small wooden pocket watch. The pocket watch had belonged to her grandmother. There was also a silver thermos filled with cardamom tea. Tonight, Ellie was leaving the city. She was taking the Coastal Night Express to a small town called Seabrook. Seabrook was where her grandmother had lived. When Ellie was a child, she spent every summer there. Her grandmother's house had a white wooden fence, a dark blue front door, a porch with an old wooden swing, and a small garden filled with lavender, rosemary, and white roses. The ocean was only a few minutes away. Every morning, Ellie and her grandmother would walk along the beach. They would collect shells from the wet sand. Her grandmother would hold up each shell and say, "Every shell has traveled through the sea. That means every shell carries a little story." In the afternoons, they ate lemon cake by the kitchen window. In the evenings, her grandmother watered the garden while Ellie sat in an old rocking chair with a book. And at night, before Ellie went to sleep, her grandmother opened the bedroom window just a little. Then she would whisper, "Whisper." And Ellie would hear the waves in the distance. Sleeping near the sea makes your dreams softer. But Ellie had not visited Seabrook in many years. There was always work, always a meeting, always something important to do. She often thought about visiting, but then another week would pass, and then another month, and then another year. A few weeks ago, Ellie received a call from her grandmother's old neighbor, Mrs. Helen. Mrs. Helen had said, "Ellie, the house is still here. The windows are clean. The lavender is blooming again. I think it may be time for you to come home for a little while." That sentence stayed with Ellie, and now, on this quiet night, she was finally going. At the far end of the platform, two small lights appeared. They grew larger. The silver and blue Coastal Night Express rolled slowly into the station. The train came to a gentle stop. At the door stood the conductor, Mr. Thomas. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and a navy blue uniform. Ellie handed him her ticket. He looked down at it and smiled. "Seabrook," he said, "a beautiful place to arrive before sunrise." "It has been a long time," Ellie said. Mr. Thomas handed her ticket back. "Then make sure you sit by the window," he said. "You will not want to miss the first view of the sea." Ellie stepped onto the train. The car was softly lit with warm golden lamps. There were only a few passengers. An older man was reading a newspaper. A young woman was asleep beneath a gray blanket. A man in the corner was quietly looking out the window. Ellie found her seat beside the glass. She placed her suitcase above her. Then she settled into the soft seat and rested her hands in her lap. The train began to move, slowly at first, then a little faster. The platform drifted away. The station lights faded behind her. The tall buildings became smaller. The train crossed a long bridge over a dark river. Below, the lights of the city shimmered on the water. And then, little by little, New York disappeared. Outside the window were open fields, dark trees, quiet farmhouses, small stations with empty benches. The wheels found their rhythm. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. Ellie opened her thermos. She poured herself a cup of warm tea. Steam rose slowly into the air. The sweet smell of cardamom reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. Her grandmother had always said that tea should never be rushed. "You have to let the water warm slowly," she would say. "And you have to let the leaves take their time." Ellie looked out at the dark fields. Maybe people needed time too, she thought. The woman beside her looked over. "That tea smells lovely," she said. Ellie smiled. "It is cardamom tea. My grandmother used to make it." The woman wore a green wool hat. At her feet was a small woven basket filled with apples, fresh bread, and purple flowers. "My name is Rose," she said. "Are you going to Seabrook?" "I am," Ellie said. Mrs. Rose looked at her carefully. "Are you Ellie?" Ellie smiled in surprise. "Yes. How did you know?" "I knew your grandmother," Mrs. Rose said. Everyone in Seabrook knew the house with the white fence, the blue door, and the lavender garden. Ellie felt a quiet warmth in her chest. Mrs. Rose took a red apple from her basket and offered it to Ellie. "An apple is a good companion for a night journey," she said. Ellie accepted it. "Thank you." "Your grandmother used to save lavender seedlings for my garden," Mrs. Rose said. "She believed lavender could make even the wind feel calmer." Ellie looked down at the apple in her hand. "She had a way of making everything calmer," she said. Mrs. Rose nodded. "Some people leave behind a kind of peace," she said. "It stays in old houses, in gardens, in cups, in chairs by the window." The train continued through the night. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. The lights inside the train dimmed. Most of the passengers fell asleep. Ellie pulled back the curtain. The sky was full of stars. In the city, she rarely saw more than a few, but here, far from bright streets, there were thousands. The train passed through a forest, then open fields, then low hills beneath the moonlight. Ellie took out the old blue-covered book from her bag. On the first page, in her grandmother's handwriting, were the words, "The road that teaches you to slow down is never too long." Ellie read the sentence once, then again. She opened her pocket watch. It was 1:20 in the morning. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The small sound of the watch blended with the train. Click, clack, tick, tock, click, clack, tick, tock. After a while, Mrs. Rose looked out the window. "We will cross the river soon," she said. "The moon is bright tonight." The train moved onto a long iron bridge. Below was a wide, quiet river. Moonlight stretched across the water like a silver path. The river moved gently, softly, slowly. Ellie watched the light shimmer on the water. She thought about all the beautiful things she had missed while rushing through her days. Quiet rivers, sleeping towns, warm tea, old train stations, a sky full of stars. Perhaps peace had not been far away. Perhaps she had only needed to stop long enough to notice it. Ellie put on her sweater. She leaned her head against the cool window. The train continued through the night. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. and slowly Ellie fell asleep. In her dream, she was a little girl again. She was walking beside her grandmother on the beach. The sand was wet beneath her feet. The sky was covered with soft silver clouds. Waves rolled toward the shore, then gently pulled away. Ellie held her grandmother's hand. "Grandma," she asked, "does the sea always talk?" Her grandmother smiled. "The sea is always talking," she said. "Not everyone knows how to listen." "What does it say?" Her grandmother looked toward the water. "Sometimes it says, 'Slow down.'" A wave rolled in. "Sometimes it says, 'Let go of what has already gone.'" Another wave came. "And sometimes it says, 'Begin again.'" Her grandmother picked up a small shell and placed it in Ellie's hand. "Hold it to your ear," she said. Ellie lifted the shell. Inside it, she could hear the sea. Then a soft bell sounded. Ellie opened her eyes. Morning was beginning. The sky outside the train had turned pale blue and gray. A little mist rested on the window. Somewhere in the distance, birds were beginning to sing. Mr. Thomas walked through the train car. "Seabrook in 15 minutes, he said softly. Ellie sat up. Mrs. Rose smiled at her. "Look out the window," she said. "You will see the sea soon." The train turned around a wide curve, and then Ellie saw it, the ocean. At first, it was only a blue-gray line beneath the morning sky. Then she saw the white lines of waves, the mist over the water, the first pink and golden colors of sunrise. Ellie looked silently through the glass. The sea was still there. So many years had passed. Ellie had changed, the city had changed, life had changed, but the sea was still there, quiet, vast, endless. The train arrived at Seabrook Station. The small wooden station had a blue sign that read, "Seabrook." The air smelled of salt. A few seagulls called in the distance. Ellie stepped down from the train. Mrs. Rose stepped down too. Before leaving, she gently held Ellie's hand. "Open the house," she said. "It may not be exactly the same, but love has a way of staying in old places." Ellie smiled. "I will look for it." She walked away from the station. The town was beginning to wake. Small homes stood along quiet streets. Soft lights glowed behind curtains. From a bakery near the harbor came the warm smell of fresh bread. Near the water, small boats rocked gently in the harbor. Their ropes tapped softly against the wooden docks. Ting, ting, ting. Ellie turned down a familiar lane. At the end of it stood the house. The white fence, the blue door, the wooden porch swing, the lavender garden. For a long moment, Ellie simply stood there. It felt as though the house recognized her. She took out the old key. The lock turned slowly. The blue door opened. Inside was the familiar scent of old wood. The blue sofa was still in the living room. The old rocking chair still stood by the window. The blue flowered cups still waited on the kitchen shelf. Ellie opened the window. Sea air moved gently through the house. It carried the smell of salt, the scent of lavender, and the distant sound of waves. Ellie made herself a cup of tea. She found her grandmother's old kettle. She warmed the water slowly. She added cardamom and a little honey. Then she poured the tea into one of the blue cups. She carried it to the porch. The morning sun was rising. The sea was turning blue. A small fishing boat moved quietly toward the harbor. A dog ran across the beach. Seagulls drifted in the wind. Ellie sat down on the porch swing. For the first time in a very long while, there was no meeting, no deadline, no clock to watch, no place she needed to rush toward. There was only the slow swing of the porch, the warm cup in her hands, and the sea. Later that morning, Mrs. Helen arrived with fresh bread, orange jam, and white flowers. She hugged Ellie. "Your grandmother would be happy that you came," she said. They sat at the kitchen table. Mrs. Helen told Ellie that her grandmother had often sat by the window in the evenings. She would watch the sea, Mrs. Helen said, and she would say, "Ellie will come back one day. She is only busy right now." Then Mrs. Helen gave Ellie a small envelope. She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. It said, "My dear Ellie, if you ever return to this house, remember that you do not have to prove anything here. You may simply rest. You may sit on the porch. You may water the garden. You may listen to the sea. You do not always have to move quickly. With love, Grandma." Ellie held the letter quietly in her hands. Outside, the waves rolled in and rolled away and rolled in again. For the next few days, Ellie lived slowly. In the mornings, she visited the little bakery by the harbor. In the afternoons, she walked along the beach. Her footprints appeared in the wet sand. The waves gently erased some and left others behind. In the evenings, Ellie watered the lavender garden. At night, she sat in her grandmother's rocking chair. Moonlight rested on the ocean. The lamp beside her gave the room a warm golden glow. One evening, a light rain began to fall. It tapped softly against the porch roof. The lavender leaves held tiny drops of water. The ocean became a deeper shade of blue. Ellie wrapped a blanket around herself and sat on the porch with a cup of tea. In the city, rain had often meant traffic, umbrellas, noise, and rushing. But here, rain felt different. Here, it seemed to say, "You do not have to do anything tonight. Just rest." On Ellie's final night in Seabrook, she sat on the porch beneath a sky full of stars. In the distance, the lighthouse turned its gentle beam across the dark water. The waves came in and went out. Ellie opened her grandmother's pocket watch. Tick, tock, tick, tock. She understood something then. Time did not need to stop. She only needed to stop fighting it. Sometimes all a person needs is a slower road, a quiet train, a warm cup of tea, a blue door, and the sound of the sea. The next morning, Ellie returned to the station. Mr. Thomas was waiting by the train door. "Going back to the city?" he asked. Ellie smiled. "Yes, but I think I am taking something with me." Mr. Thomas nodded. "The sea does not need a suitcase," he said. "It travels quietly inside you." The train began to move. Seabrook Station drifted away. The white fence, the blue door, the lavender garden, all slowly disappeared behind the morning mist. But Ellie knew they were not really gone. She had her grandmother's letter. She had the memory of the porch swing. She had the sound of the waves, and she had the soft rhythm of the last train. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack. Thank you for resting with drift and dream sleep. There is nowhere else you need to go. Let the train carry you gently towards sleep. Let the ocean grow softer in the distance, and let yourself rest. Good night.